Hello, miladies of inestimable value. She was never just a child. She was a silent storm waiting to be understood. Most little girls wanted to be princesses. She was busy wondering why the king was always lying and the queen looked so tired. You see, while other children were learning their ABCs, the Sigma female child was already decoding people's intentions, questioning authority, and secretly analyzing why everyone acted so fake. Here's the truth most people can't handle. Sigma females are not made. They are born wired differently, and science backs this up. According to developmental psychology, some children display hypersensitive awareness and emotional independence before the age of 5, traits that make them outliers in both the playground and the classroom. And guess what? That outlier didn't throw tantrums. She threw questions that adults couldn't answer. She wasn't rebellious. She was just unbothered by the nonsense everyone else subscribed to. And for that, the world tried to put her in a box. She burned it. So before you judge her silence, her smirk, her refusal to play pretend friend, understand this. She wasn't difficult. She was just 10 steps ahead, wondering why everyone was walking in circles. Let's peel back the curtain and expose 20 brutally honest, jaw-dropping truths about what it really means to be a Sigma female as a child, not the sugar-coated version, the real version, the one no one talks about. Ready? Let's go deeper. Number 1. They were feared, not for what they did, but for what people sensed they were capable of. Even as a little girl, a Sigma female had a strange effect on people, one she couldn't explain and others couldn't ignore. She didn't have to speak much. She didn't need to cause trouble or act out. Just her presence was enough to make certain people uncomfortable. Adults couldn't quite put their finger on it. Kids either wanted to follow her or find a way to bring her down. It wasn't because of anything she did. It was who she was, without even trying. There was something about her calmness that unsettled people who were used to noise. Something about her focus that irritated those who lived for chaos. Something about the way she didn't follow the crowd that made the crowd feel exposed. People sensed she was different, but not in the quirky or playful way that gets called cute. No, this kind of different felt like a quiet challenge, like a mirror that reflected back everyone's insecurities without her even saying a word. The harsh truth is, people fear what they don't understand. And the Sigma female child was hard to figure out. She didn't chase approval. She wasn't easy to manipulate, and most of all, she didn't need the group to feel whole. That alone made her a threat in environments built on popularity, conformity, and control. Even at that young age, it was clear she was never going to be the one following rules just because they existed. If the rules didn't make sense, she questioned them. If the people in charge didn't act right, she pulled away. And that quiet resistance made her powerful. Some adults tried to label her, too serious, too cold, too distant. But deep down they knew she saw through them. That's what really bothered them. She wasn't loud, but her energy was. She wasn't aggressive, but her boundaries were solid. And when people couldn't shake her, shame her, or shape her, they got scared. Because even as a child she wasn't someone you could control. And people feel safest around those they can control. That's why she wasn't just different, she was feared. And the fear didn't come from what she did, it came from what she could do and the fact that no one could stop her. Number 2. They didn't trust compliments, because they already knew who meant it and who didn't. A Sigma female child didn't melt under praise the way others did. Compliments didn't light her up or make her more obedient. In fact, they often made her pause. She'd tilt her head, narrow her eyes a little, and silently wonder, what do you really want from me? Because even at a young age, she understood something most adults still haven't figured out. Not all compliments are genuine. Some are sugar-coated traps. She could tell when someone's, "You're such a good girl," really meant, "Keep behaving the way I like." She picked up on the change in tone, the fake smiles, the empty flattery meant to control her behavior. It was never about being appreciated. It was about being tamed, and she refused to be tamed. She'd smile politely, maybe even say thank you, but deep down the message was clear. You're not fooling me. The truth is, her instincts were razor sharp. She didn't need anyone to tell her what was real and what wasn't. She felt it. It was in the shift of a person's energy, the forced excitement in their voice, the way their eyes didn't match their words. And once she noticed that inconsistency, it was game over. No matter how shiny the praise sounded, it didn't mean a thing if it wasn't backed by real energy. This made her a challenge for manipulative adults, especially the ones who used compliments as currency. Teachers, relatives, or even other kids would try to win her over with nice words, but they couldn't crack her. Not because she was cold or distant, but because she didn't need their approval to feel worthy. That kind of power is rare in a child, and dangerous to people who rely on control. So she kept her guard up, not in a bitter way, but in a wise one. Because being overly praised taught her one hard lesson early. Sometimes the nicest words come with the ugliest intentions. And a Sigma girl learns quickly that protecting your peace is more important than soaking in fake praise. Number 3. They grew up knowing too much. Not because they were taught, but because they absorbed everything. A Sigma female didn't need someone to sit her down and explain what was going on. She sensed it. Long before she had the vocabulary for things like gaslighting, envy, or emotional neglect, she could feel the tension in the room. The way a parent's smile didn't match their tone, the way two adults acted polite in public but couldn't hide the silent war in private. She saw the shift in people's eyes, the crack in their voices, the energy that changed when certain topics came up. And while other kids were distracted by cartoons and candy, she was watching the emotional weather forecast of everyone around her. She didn't understand the full picture yet, but her body kept the score. Her gut never forgot. When someone was faking kindness, she felt it in her skin. When someone was lying, she didn't need proof. It just felt wrong. She noticed which sibling got more attention. She saw the favoritism, the passive aggression, the unspoken rules no one dared to say out loud, and she absorbed it all like a sponge, quietly, deeply, permanently. This early emotional exposure didn't make her wise beyond her years in the sweet, poetic way people like to romanticize. It made her guarded. It made her question trust. It gave her this sharp awareness that most kids didn't have, and most adults resented. Because while other children still believed everyone had good intentions, the Sigma girl had already learned otherwise. And when she did finally learn the words, like manipulation, resentment, toxic love, everything clicked. Every strange moment from her past suddenly made sense. And here's the harsh part. Once a Sigma girl connects the dots, she doesn't unsee them. She doesn't pretend. She doesn't repress. She stores those lessons like files in a mental cabinet labeled "Never Again." From that point on, she becomes nearly impossible to fool. Because she doesn't just remember what happened, she remembers how it felt. And that feeling becomes her radar for life. So no, she didn't grow up too fast by choice. Life handed her the raw, unfiltered version early. And while it shaped her into someone powerful, it also came at a cost. A childhood spent decoding adult dysfunction instead of simply living free from it. Number 4. Friendships were confusing because peers either idolized them, used them, or tried to destroy them. Friendships for a Sigma female child weren't simple. While other kids were making best friends by bonding over cartoons or snacks, the Sigma girl was quietly observing how quickly people changed, how loyalty often came with a price, and how being different made you a target. Some kids followed her around like she was a mystery they wanted to solve or a leader they wanted to cling to. Others only came close when they needed answers, attention, or help. And a few, they just wanted to tear her down because they couldn't stand how unfazed she was by their games. She didn't understand it at first. Why were people either worshiping her or trying to compete with her? Why couldn't they just treat her like a normal person? Why did being quiet and focused make her seem threatening? There were days when she felt like she was walking through a social minefield. Smiling faces one moment, subtle digs the next. One day, someone would call her their best friend. The next, they'd turn the entire group against her for not playing along or being too much. And the strangest part? She wasn't doing anything to attract attention. She wasn't loud, didn't seek the spotlight, didn't even try to be liked. But somehow that's what made her noticeable. People were drawn to her confidence, but the kind that didn't need an audience. and that made others feel insecure. Because kids, like adults, can sense when someone has a mind of their own. And when they can't control it, they either try to attach themselves to it or destroy it. Over time, this repeated pattern created a silent rule in her mind. Don't trust easily. She learned to smile on the surface but keep her guard up inside, to listen more than she spoke, to test people before letting them in. It wasn't bitterness, it was survival. Because when you grow up being either the trophy, the tool, or the target, you realize quickly that being liked isn't always about being valued. Sometimes it's just about being used. And that's why, even as an adult, the Sigma woman doesn't chase connection. She filters it, ruthlessly. Because the child in her remembers what it cost to trust the wrong people. Number 5. They questioned the point of school. Not out of laziness, but because they instinctively felt the system was broken. A Sigma female child didn't sit in class blindly absorbing everything she was told. She sat there watching, and not just the teacher. She watched the system, the patterns, the absurd rules. While the other kids were racing to be teacher's pet or get gold stars, she was silently asking, what's the point of all this? She wasn't lazy. She wasn't rebellious for the sake of it. She just couldn't bring herself to pretend that it all made sense. Memorizing outdated facts, sitting still for hours, raising her hand just to ask permission to speak, none of it sat right with her. She looked around and thought, this isn't learning, this is training, training to obey, training to conform, training to compete over meaningless rewards. And let's be honest, she saw through the adults in charge too. Some teachers were kind and passionate, sure, but many, they were bitter, bored, and hiding behind authority. And that authority didn't impress her. If you couldn't explain why something mattered, or if your power came from intimidation instead of inspiration, she stopped listening, not out loud. She'd sit quietly and play the game. But mentally, she had already checked out. She also questioned why imagination was punished. Why asking too many questions got you labeled as disruptive. Why daydreaming was treated like a defect instead of a strength. She knew deep down that creativity, independent thinking, and emotional intelligence mattered more than memorizing who invented the light bulb. But try telling that to a system that rewards obedience over originality. This disconnect made her feel alienated. Not because she wasn't smart, she was often more insightful than the kids getting straight A's. But she didn't care about grades the way they did. She cared about meaning. And when school couldn't give her that, she quietly built her own world, a place where ideas were free, where thinking wasn't boxed in, and where truth mattered more than approval. So no, she didn't hate school. She hated the game of it, the fakeness, the limits. And while everyone else was chasing validation, she was already outgrowing the entire structure, silently planning how to escape it without losing herself in the process. Number 6. They never truly played. They simulated life. Sigma girls never really played the way most kids did. They weren't just dressing up dolls or acting out fairy tales for fun. What looked like make-believe on the outside was something else entirely, a kind of silent social lab. They used their toys, stories, and imaginary characters not to escape reality, but to understand it. Every interaction was a miniature test, every game a quiet observation. When other kids were giving their dolls magical powers or throwing tea parties, the Sigma girl was creating full emotional scenes. Complex dynamics, characters with motives. She'd watch how mother doll handled stress, how friend doll reacted to jealousy, how teacher doll masked insecurity with fake authority. She was studying people without even realizing it. She didn't play to pass time. She played to decode life. This instinct to study others ran deep. While other kids giggled and made up silly voices, the Sigma girl paid attention to tone, behavior, patterns. She was curious about why certain characters clashed or why one always needed validation, and she'd shift the scenario again and again, subtly tweaking each interaction, just to see how the outcome changed. It wasn't a game, it was fieldwork. Adults often praised her for being so creative, but they rarely understood what was really happening. She wasn't lost in fantasy, she was deep in analysis. And because she often played alone, she had the space to dig even deeper away from distractions. She was the director, the audience, the critic, and the analyst, all at once. The imaginary world was her testing ground, where she could make sense of real-world dysfunction, emotions, manipulation, love, power, all the heavy stuff that no one talked about, but she felt every day. What's wild is that even when she played with other kids, she stayed in observation mode. She watched who tried to lead, who followed, who manipulated, who folded under pressure. She was tracking behavior while playing tag or building blocks. Every game was a scan of human nature. And while most kids forgot those moments by sunset, the Sigma girl filed them away. Because she wasn't just playing pretend, she was preparing. Quietly learning the rules of a world that never made much sense so she could move through it on her own terms. Number 7. They often took the emotional burden of being the adult in the room, even in their own family. Sigma girls often carried a weight that no child should have had to carry, the unspoken role of being the stable one. While the adults around them lost control, argued, drank too much, broke down or lashed out, the Sigma child quietly stepped into emotional adulthood. Not because she wanted to, not because she was ready, but because someone had to. She didn't cry when chaos erupted. She scanned the room. She read faces. She picked up on body language. Her heart may have raced, but her face stayed neutral, because showing panic would only add fuel to the fire. If the family home turned into a battlefield, she didn't scream. She disappeared, not physically, but mentally. She created a separate world in her head, a safe zone she could vanish into while her body sat frozen at the dinner table or curled up in a corner. That wasn't imagination. That was a survival mechanism. She learned how to read moods the way other kids learned math. She could tell when a parent was about to snap. She knew when it was time to leave the room, when to stay silent, when to take care of a younger sibling. She knew how to soothe others' feelings before even being allowed to explore her own. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart because there was no one there to catch her if she did. People called her mature for her age. But maturity born out of necessity isn't a compliment, it's a scar. Behind that emotional stability was a child who had to bypass her own needs, her own innocence, just to maintain some level of peace. And that kind of forced responsibility shapes everything. How she trusts, how she copes, how she expresses herself, or more often doesn't. Even as an adult, she might find it hard to relax around others, hard to cry, hard to let someone else take care of her, because her wiring was forged in fire, and while it made her strong, sharp, and hyper-aware, it also left her carrying a weight that should have never been hers in the first place. Number 8. They got punished for being too quiet. As if silence is a crime. Growing up as a Sigma girl meant constantly being misunderstood for one simple thing, not talking all the time. In classrooms, family gatherings, and playgrounds, her silence was treated like a flaw, not a personality. Teachers asked, "Why don't you speak up more?" Relatives asked, "Why are you so shy?" And when she didn't respond with the kind of energy they expected, people assumed she was being cold, stuck up, or even rebellious. But none of those assumptions were true. She just didn't see the point in wasting words. She wasn't rude, she was selective. She wasn't shy, she was calculating. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was depth. While everyone else rushed to fill the air with noise, she was observing, listening, picking up on what people weren't saying. Her brain was always working, but not in a way that needed constant external validation. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She wanted to understand why everyone else was so desperate to be seen. But society doesn't make space for that kind of wiring. In school, participation points favored the loudest voice, not the most thoughtful one. At home, being quiet at the dinner table got her side-eyed or scolded. People around her were so addicted to noise that they couldn't comprehend someone who thrived in stillness. So instead of being praised for her emotional control or inner calm, she got labeled as difficult or distant. The harsh truth is that a Sigma girl often learns very early on that silence makes people uncomfortable because it reveals their own insecurity. They don't know what to do with someone who isn't constantly performing, pleasing, or pretending. So they try to shame her into being more normal, more social, more loud. But what they didn't realize is that she wasn't being quiet out of fear. She was conserving her energy for what actually mattered, and that silence they resented, it's the same silence that made her dangerous later in life. Because while everyone else was busy talking, she was studying. And when she finally spoke, it was never for attention. It was to shift the entire room. Number 9. Their sense of justice was unnervingly intense, even before they understood what justice meant. Even as children, Sigma girls had a radar for injustice that was almost unnerving. They could smell favoritism the moment it entered the room. If a teacher gave one student a pass but penalized another for the same thing, the Sigma girl noticed. If a parent gave different rules to different siblings with no explanation, she felt it in her bones. And unlike most kids who would let it go, she couldn't. Not because she wanted drama, not because she was trying to be difficult, but because something in her simply couldn't sit with hypocrisy. She didn't care if it made her unpopular. She didn't care if the teacher got defensive or the class fell silent when she asked, "Why did he get a better grade for the same answer?" She wasn't trying to challenge authority. She was holding it accountable. That's a big difference. And she did it with a calm, piercing directness that made adults uncomfortable, because most adults aren't used to kids who are both intelligent and unbothered by fear of consequences. This intensity didn't come from textbooks or lectures, it was instinct. Even before she had a full understanding of what justice meant, her gut knew when something was off, and not just in obvious ways. She could sense subtle imbalances, micro-favoritism, manipulation wrapped in politeness, fake apologies. She saw straight through it, and she refused to play along. Other kids would call her too serious or too intense. But the truth was, she simply held people to their own rules. She remembered what was said, paid attention to what was done, and pointed out the disconnect. And that terrified people, because it's one thing to break rules, it's another to be calmly called out by a kid who isn't even supposed to know better but somehow does. And while some adults tried to punish that honesty, others secretly respected it, though they'd never admit it out loud, because they saw what she was becoming, someone who wouldn't let power go unchecked, someone who wouldn't be trained to tolerate unfairness, someone who couldn't lie to herself, even if staying silent would have made life easier. That wasn't rebellion. That was integrity. And it started long before she even knew the word. Number 10. They didn't crave the spotlight. They questioned why everyone else needed it so badly. Most kids wanted to be seen, to be praised, to be clapped for. Whether it was showing off in class, putting on performances at family events, or bragging about something small, the hunger for attention was everywhere. But the Sigma girl? She stood back, watching, analyzing. Not because she lacked confidence, but because she didn't understand why everyone was so desperate to be noticed. She never chased applause. It didn't excite her. In fact, it often felt fake, like people were clapping more out of habit than sincerity. And when she saw others constantly fishing for validation, whether it was through exaggerating stories, faking emotions, or pretending to be someone they weren't, she didn't admire it. She questioned it. Not out loud, at least not yet, but in her head she was asking, why do they need so much from other people just to feel okay? Even as a child she could tell when someone's confidence was just noise covering an insecure void. She could see the way kids would light up when praised and shrink when ignored, and it struck her as hollow. That kind of dependence on approval felt fragile, unstable, almost desperate. And though she didn't yet have the vocabulary to articulate it, she felt something they didn't. A quiet strength in not needing anyone to clap for her. The irony. Because she wasn't begging for attention, people often gave it to her anyway, but not always in a good way. Her indifference made her stand out more. Adults called her mysterious or hard to read. Kids either wanted to copy her or tear her down, but through it all she stayed centered. She didn't need the room to revolve around her. She needed the room to make sense. That questioning mind, why do people perform? Why do they need to be seen? Why do they base their worth on someone else's reaction, set her apart? It made her immune to trends, immune to flattery, and immune to the addiction of external validation. She wasn't looking for a spotlight. She was looking for substance. And even if she couldn't explain it at the time, she instinctively knew one truth. When you don't crave the crowd, you have power over it. Number 11. Their emotional maturity terrified adults who weren't used to being seen through by a child. Most adults are used to kids being easy to overlook, the noisy, awkward, or clueless little beings who follow rules because they have to, not because they understand. But Sigma girls, they were different. Their emotional maturity was like a spotlight in a dark room, revealing everything adults wanted to hide. And that terrified many grown-ups because it meant there was no escaping being seen. Unlike other children who accepted adult authority without question, Sigma girls silently dissected every word, every smile, every gesture. They didn't need to say anything to expose when an adult was pretending or hiding something behind a forced smile. Their eyes and quiet demeanor did the job. It was like having a mirror that reflected not just faces but intentions and insecurities back at the person who looked into it. Adults who were used to talking down to kids felt unsettled. Here was a child who didn't just obey blindly or laugh on cue. She was watching, judging, understanding more than she was supposed to. Her silence wasn't submission. It was awareness. And that was a threat to anyone who relied on appearances, half-truths, or manipulations to get by. Her emotional maturity wasn't flashy or loud. It was subtle but sharp, a calm intelligence that didn't give adults the comfort of underestimating her. That quiet knowing made many adults defensive, uneasy, or even resentful. Because when a child can see through your hypocrisy, fake kindness, or emotional games, it forces you to confront your own flaws, something most people prefer to avoid. So instead of admiration, many adults responded with frustration or dismissal, trying to box her back into a role where she was easier to manage. But the truth remained. A Sigma girl's emotional maturity was a force adults weren't prepared for, and that unspoken tension shaped how she navigated the world from that moment forward. Number 12. They had a terrifying gift, the ability to detach from toxic people, even if it was their own parents. From a young age, Sigma girls possessed a gift that both protected and isolated them, the terrifying ability to emotionally detach from toxic people, even when those people were their own parents. While most children instinctively crave approval, bending and twisting themselves to fit into whatever mold keeps them safe or loved, Sigma girls operated on a different wavelength. They didn't just seek love. They analyzed the dynamics around them, recognizing when affection was conditional, manipulative, or damaging. This detachment wasn't a choice made lightly or casually. It was a survival skill born from necessity. When the people meant to nurture them instead caused pain or confusion, the Sigma girl instinctively pulled away inside, creating an invisible shield to protect her spirit. It wasn't about rebellion or disrespect. It was about self-preservation in an environment where trusting blindly could mean losing herself. What made this ability so unsettling to others was how easily she could disconnect without drama or protest. She didn't lash out or demand attention. She simply withdrew, calm, quiet, and unbothered on the surface while fiercely guarding her inner world. This kind of emotional armor was often mistaken for coldness or indifference by those who didn't understand her. Adults would label her ungrateful or distant, missing the deeper truth that she was preserving what little sanity and peace she could claim. The Sigma girl learned early that love wasn't always safe, and approval wasn't always genuine. So instead of seeking validation from toxic sources, she became her own sanctuary. This rare ability to detach without losing herself set her apart in a world addicted to emotional entanglement. It made her fiercely independent, but also painfully alone. Detaching from toxic ties, especially family, is one of the most radical acts a child can perform. For a Sigma girl, it was less a choice and more a necessity, because in that detachment lay the key to surviving and eventually thriving on her own terms. Growing up as a Sigma female is far from the typical childhood story. It's a journey marked by profound solitude, sharp observation, and a resilience forged in quiet battles no one else sees. From the very beginning, Sigma girls carry a weight that few understand, a weight that demands they navigate a world built on unspoken rules they refuse to follow. Their childhood is not filled with carefree play or simple friendships, but with layers of complexity that shape their unique lens on life. They learn early that trust is a currency not easily earned, that emotional survival means detaching from toxicity, and that being misunderstood is simply part of their path. This unconventional upbringing doesn't just make them different, it makes them extraordinary. While others may chase approval, Sigma girls carve their own space, often in silence, often alone. They develop a rare emotional intelligence and maturity that unnerves adults and peers alike. Their ability to see through facades, to question the status quo, and to stand firm against social pressures prepares them for a world that rewards conformity more than authenticity. But instead of bending, they grow stronger in the gaps left by isolation and rejection. In many ways, their childhood is the crucible in which a fierce independence is born. It's a time of tough lessons, learning that power lies not in loudness or popularity, but in quiet confidence and self-awareness. The Sigma girl's early experiences teach her to trust herself above all else, to rely on her own judgment when the world around her feels unreliable or even hostile. This foundation becomes the secret source of her later success and magnetism. Ultimately, understanding the childhood of a Sigma female means recognizing that what looks like aloofness or detachment on the surface is actually the armor she had to build to survive. It is a testament to her strength that she not only endured, but transformed those early hardships into a profound inner power. For those lucky enough to truly know her, the Sigma girl's story is a reminder that greatness often rises from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the loneliest childhood births the most extraordinary souls. If you found this deep dive into the childhood of Sigma females as compelling as I did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Your likes and comments not only keep us inspired, but also help bring more powerful, honest content like this to light. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand the strength behind silence and the power of standing apart. Let's keep the conversation going, because stories like these deserve to be heard. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.